Well, thank you, and I appreciate the question. Yes, many people have called me Mr. Beep over the years, and that's because of a presentation called Beep that I gave in 2006. It was kind of pivotal for GS1 because we moved a bit away from talking about technology all the time to beginning a conversation about how our standards have impacted the way that families and consumers live their lives. So, yeah, although the name Mr. Beep carries, my real name, the name I use is Nadi Gray. And I work for GS1 Global Office, and I'm very pleased to be here, honored to be here with you today. Thank you to GS1 Slovenia for the invitation. And I'm also proud to say I've been to Slovenia a couple of years ago. It was a great visit, beautiful country, and so appreciate having that on my list of somewhere around 50 countries I've visited in my life. So today we're going to talk about the past because sometimes the past is worth repeating. And that is certainly the case with GS1. So when we look at the last 50 years of GS1 transforming the way the world works and lives, we start here with this little apparatus. This used to be in almost every grocery store on earth. And who can tell me what it is? Take a second and look at the answers. And if you guessed number 2, price label dispenser, then you would be correct. And why does this matter? Why does the price label dispenser even matter? Is it because when we use them, there were less mistakes made key entering prices than scanning barcodes? Was it easier to update the price labels on all the different products than to update their price in a database? Or was it faster to key enter the price than to go beep at checkout? No, none of those are the answer. In fact, all of those are the problem that led to the first use case for GS1. And 50 years ago, this year, in New York City, a group of industry leaders decided there was a space for them to collaborate rather than compete because it would be beneficial to all of them and to the consumers. They arrived at what was called the Universal Product Code, a number that they could use when they were exchanging information about products or identifying the products themselves. They also agreed to automate the process of identification using some technology that had not been decided yet. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. To talk about those years, I went back to my archives to find some videos that I made in 2007 with Mr. Alan Haberman. Alan was a beautiful man and a really good friend. He was one of the founders, if not the founder, of GS1 and a co-chair on that original committee. So let him tell you about that first meeting.
I headed up one of the 2 subcommittees, one to create the code, and that finished its work in 5 minutes because 6 CEOs from each side of the business, or 5 from each side of the business, decided what the code was going to be, and that's where the 5-digit number came from, and that's where the individual owners were allowed to add the additional digits.
Alan went on to be the chair of the committee that selected the EAN UPC barcode. You'll see it in that table there. It's the one that was invented by IBM. And I remember back in those days, at least in the years when I came to work at GS1 25 years ago, I worked with some of the inventors of these symbologies, and I got to tell you, some of them were still not over the fact that their barcode wasn't the one selected. But let you hear from Alan again about the symbol selection committee.
My committee took 2 years, 2.5 years, to come up with the technology and to be sure of the technology that resulted in the UPC, and to be sure that there was equipment out there that could read it, and that we could tie it into cash registers and that it would work.
So keep that in mind. 2.5 years. Alan told me that it took a long time for the industry to come together, but once they did, they made a decision on the identifier in a few minutes, but then took 2.5 years to innovate on what technology to use. And then in this video, Alan will explain why GS1 is truly global. In fact, in the beginning, they thought that it would only be a US initiative and that only 6,000 companies would benefit from it. However, because of the man, which Alan will introduce here, we now have a system used in over 115 countries and by millions of companies. So let's learn why.
There was a very important fourth reason for the rapid expansion of this program into so many different corners, the reach that was achieved. That was the advent of Europe on the scene. And it was carried onto the scene by a visionary man by the name of Albert Heijn, who you all will know. And Albert sat in on our meetings in the beginning, recognized what they could be done with them, moved off to Europe and created a European ad hoc committee, and before we knew it, they had agreed in 1976 to begin to adopt a universal code for the many countries that they were involved in, and made the wise decision that it would be coordinated along with the American versions. And so was born EAN.
If you think about that, how easy would it have been for a European leader to simply say, well, I can come up with something even better than what the US came up with? No, because better is not always best. Sometimes together is better. And that is exactly what Albert Heijn saw. He saw a system that could truly transform the globe. And because of that, he petitioned IBM, along with others, for the 13th digit in the EAN symbol, which then led to its global expansion. So all of the decisions of our founders, they were really good, but why would one supermarket, Marsh Supermarkets in Troy, Ohio, why would they decide to invest in scanners? There were no products with barcodes at that time anyway. And why would Wrigley's be the first company to print barcodes onto its packaging? They had no retail customers other than Marsh who had a barcode scanner. Well, that was their reason to believe in each other. The collaboration and the investment in time for that led to implementing this together. So when you look at their decisions, they all started with the word we, together. They decided that they should collaborate where it makes sense. Obviously, they were fierce competitors, but collaboration made sense. They also thought big. They thought about the full supply chain, but they focused step by step, starting with point of sale, starting with a product identifier, moving to a technology, moving to implementation. And finally, that implementation took place over a period of years. It rolled out, but everyone was committed to getting the job done. So we could move from the price label that you see on the top of that soup can to the barcode on the top of that soup can, and doing that universally. So what are our reasons to believe? Well, we still have the same original reason. We want an open and interoperable, efficient supply chain. But we want so much more now. We want to be able to see things as they happen, not after they happen. We want to know when a product has been diverted, or maybe it hasn't been carried to the place where it will be used and controlled within its temperature range. We want consumer and patient safety. We want a little girl to get medicine appropriate to her age, not to her mother's age, so that she goes home safe. And we want the toy that's been recalled to be to alert the consumer that they need to send it back. We want a common response to regulatory requirements so that they can benefit from the speed to market and interoperability of using global standards. And finally, we want to enable consumers to get data they can trust from the parties who created it, and do that in the way that consumers do today with mobile phones or with their iPads. So this history of collaboration, communication, thinking big but staying focused, innovating but implementing together, is a history that is worth repeating. So the next 50 years, or should we say 30, in Slovenia's case, I believe you have a birthday coming up next year, 30 years. And I cannot wait to hear about it. And also you had a birthday as an independent nation this year of 30 years. So 30 seems to be a really good number for you. 50 for the global company of GS1. But that future begins with you. And the challenges and the opportunities we face are even greater than the generations before us. So let's take a minute, watch a video, think about the years to come and the impact that we can have on the world ahead. I hope you have a wonderful conference, and I thank you again for inviting me to share it with you.
Everyone's always talking about how we need to work together to make things better, but it hardly ever seems to work out that way, right? I want to tell you a story about a time when it really did happen, 50 years ago, when the world looked a lot different than it does today. It started right here, in a real supermarket in the real world. The stakes may not have seemed very high, but everybody agreed that this little price sticker wasn't going to cut it anymore. So they imagined something better. Something that would save people time and money by helping to identify all the stuff we buy and how much it costs. Believe it or not, it took a lot of really smart people to make this happen, and even then, success was uncertain. But big problems call for big solutions, and a few bold business leaders stepped forward to do something nobody thought was possible. They put aside their differences and worked together to create a new and better way to shop. In other words, goodbye price sticker. On March 31st, 1971, 50 years ago now, this group of leaders met up in New York City, and they agreed on 3 things. First, they agreed to collaborate on a way to tell this can of soup apart from this other can of soup. They called it a Global Trade Item Number, or GTIN for short. It's kind of like an ID card number for things. Second, they agreed to think big. They knew the creation of this number was just the beginning. Eventually, they imagined it could be used outside the grocery store checkout counter, from warehouses to boardrooms and everywhere in between. Lastly, they agreed to innovate. They decided to continue working together on a barcode that would make everybody happy.
I think the major concern was, do we have these black lines on here, defacing my label?
My committee took 2 years to be sure that there was equipment out there that could read it and that we could tie it into cash registers and that it would work.
Just imagine if two barcodes couldn't be read by the same scanner. It would be chaos. And so for this to take off, everyone had to speak the same language.
2 years later, they finally had one that was easy to print and easy to scan too. It took a few more years just to add another digit onto the GTIN number. That may not sound like a big deal, but that one extra digit allowed barcodes to travel all over the world. It's hard to imagine, but back then, a tiny product code pushed the limits of data processing almost to the breaking point.
I think it took us 3 years to have scanning in all of our stores.
It's hard to imagine now, but years ago, this was just sheer magic.
Flash forward to today, and a phone that fits in your pocket can do almost anything. And in the 50 years since that meeting in New York, that kernel of an idea grew and grew across business and across industries, thanks to leaders all over the world. Today, barcodes are used billions and billions of times a day.
It isn't an engineering task, it isn't a business task, it's a leadership task. And the fact that they pulled it off is one of the great achievements in standards in history.
Those scans and little beeps are what we see and hear every time we go to the grocery store. But it's the data behind those scans and beeps that has completely transformed our lives and the way we interact with the world around us. Today, we expect so much more information about the things we buy. We need to be able to identify a product not just among other options on the shelf, but among every other product in the world, from a store you can carry in the palm of your hand. We need to know if a product, like this can of soup, is authentic, whether it's been recalled or expired, and where the ingredients came from. Can I order it with voice command? Can you deliver it to me in 2 hours? That would be nice too. But this isn't just about grocery shopping. Today, information about a product can literally mean the difference between life and death. Healthcare professionals are facing a constant challenge to deliver the highest level of care possible to as many patients as possible by getting them the right medicines, medical devices, and of course, vaccines safely. Meeting those challenges has required the healthcare industry to make big changes, often driven by regulation, while addressing the need for global interoperability. So, they embraced an advanced barcode called the GS1 data matrix for medicinal products. This new barcode contains more than just the GTIN number. It helps ensure patients are getting a safe, unexpired product and links that information to patient records automatically. The good news is, those innovations can now be applied to retail and other industries as well. And that brings the story full circle.
3 things got us to where we are: leadership, community, and standards.
The time has come to once again collaborate, think big, and innovate. Meeting the challenges of tomorrow requires a new set of leaders who will embrace opportunities to make the world a better place in big and little ways. The truth is that consumers like me have more control today than ever before, and big companies have a choice to make. They can either embrace this new reality or become as obsolete as this old CD. That's a good one. The companies that understand how important it is to meet and exceed people's expectations are the ones most likely to stand the test of time. Today, businesses are staring down the same 3 challenges they faced 50 years ago. And with more and better data needed than ever before, this little barcode just isn't going to cut it anymore. To do so, leaders need to think big. If a barcode number is like an ID card number, then products today need a website and social media account too. The GTIN will last another 50 years, but leaders have a chance to innovate and improve on it by embracing a more powerful version of the humble little barcode. One that will help a stressed out dad confirm that a candy bar doesn't contain peanuts. One that will help a customs officer working the night shift confirm that your product isn't counterfeit. One that will help people like me connect to your product in more meaningful ways than ever before. And yes, one that will still go beep at the checkout counter.
I'm proud to have been a part of this group. We pass the baton to you. And that is so exciting. I wish I had another 30 years to put to this.
Getting this right is the challenge of a generation. The next 50 years begins today.
So I hope you enjoyed that, but more importantly, I hope you will reflect on it. Think about the challenges that you have in your country or in the country surrounding you where you may be doing business, and think about how you can collaborate, how you can think big, stay focused, innovate, and implement together. And why? The reason why is to make this world that our families live in safer, healthier, happier. And that is history worth repeating. Thank you. Have a great week. I hope your conference is amazing. And thank you again for having me.